Right. Oh, recording in progress.
Sorry.
Um, and currently I am a writer on The Creature Cases for Netflix and Lila in the Loop for PBS.
Thanks, Ruth. I'll throw it over to Diego.
Hey everyone, my name is Diego Molano. I'm a animator, director, artist, and I've been working in animation since 2012 or 2011. And I was the series creator of Victor and Valentino on Cartoon Network, and I've worked on multiple other projects. And currently, I'm working on a feature at Sony and a series at Hulu. Yeah.
Thank you, Diego. And last but not least, Alexei.
Hello, hello. My name is Alexei Bochenek. I am the creative director at Titmouse. I head up our series and feature development. As creative director, I also oversee the kind of initial development of shows that come into the studio as work for hire projects. Titmouse generates original shows, but we also do a lot of work for hire animation for other people's shows. So oftentimes, I'm tasked with helping people figure out the look and feel of their show as it develops further on it when it's already at a network.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexei.
Sure.
I'd love to start us off with our animation origin stories, and we'll kind of start at the end, Alexei, with you. And I'll kind of frame the question this way, but feel free to not answer it this way.
Sure.
I was like, what is the first animation that you saw that kind of awoke in you that desire to understand how it was made? What was the
Easy.
first time you thought, like, oh,
Easy.
somebody made this?
MTV had two programs, one that was called Liquid Television, which was these are shows, compilation shows, variety hours, something like that, terminology wise. Liquid Television, and they had another program called MTV Oddities. Both of these were platforms for smaller scale independent animation or imported animation. And I remember a few of those shows really specifically. Eon Flux was a show that was like an anime influenced show, but a very much an American show. Very, very transgressive and strange show, which yeah, aged strangely, but is still interesting. And then there was a show called The Max. The Max was an adaptation of a comic book, like an image book, I think, that was a very meta superhero commentary, kind of barely, in a really interesting way. And then there's a program called The Head, which actually included storyboards by the founder of the company I have found myself at, Titmouse, Chris Pernosky, which is just a weird twist of fate, being a boy watching this creepy late night cartoon, thinking, what weird people made this upsetting cartoon? I love it. And then one day going to work for those weird people. I mean, what could be better?
What could be better?
Yeah.
I want to circle once we get a little further in the conversation and talk about the landscape of animation today. I want to circle back to those two MTV programs.
Sure.
But Diego, I'll throw it to you. What was kind of that first animation that hit you where it hurts?
You know what's funny? I'm gonna steal a little bit of Exley's answer. It's funny because it was Eon Flux, but Eon. And what's funny is that, and another weird twist of fate, I ended up having Peter Chung as my animation supervisor on my show. And so it was just very weird to work with.
Sure.
There it is. Yeah.
There's the logo. If anybody remembers this weird eyeball.
Oh man, with the fly in it.
Fly. This was my VHS set that I almost wore out of the 3 seasons, if you could call them seasons. Some of them were short, some of them were episodes a day. Sorry to interrupt.
They don't box them like that anymore.
I actually, in college, I actually did an animation breakdown of that eye catching the fly as a Venus flytrap. I broke down all of the frames and did more artwork on that. But yeah, no, it was really cool and strange to have Peter Chung as my animation supervisor. I learned a lot from him, and man, he really is like an old school master. He has seen it all. Nothing impresses him. Nothing is ever good enough. Everything sucks, and he just wants, you know, everyone to strive for excellence. And I learned a lot from him. But I think even earlier, so one of the things that I told Peter was when Eon Flux was coming out, one of the ways that I used to learn from him, as I used to put tracing paper, I used to, well, that VHS I stole from Spencer's, or another kind of weird store like that. And I would play it over and over again, and I would pause it, and I would put tracing paper over the TV, just to kind of see how movement worked, because it was so incredible and so ahead of its time when it was coming out. And then I would turn in my artwork at my high school. I went to an arts high school, and it would be tracings of Eon. But even earlier than that, my first aha moment that things were made, that animation was made, was when I noticed as a boy watching Ninja Turtles, sometimes the bandana colors were different. Like they would color Raphael's bandana yellow, and it would just be a 2-frame pop of that. And I'd be like, wait a minute, how could, you know, I was 5 and I was like, why would that happen? So I started noticing mistakes in the animation, and I was like, whoever is photographing Raphael needs to tell him that he needs to change his bandana. So it didn't make sense to me as a boy, but that's when I started like figuring it out that, you know, people drew this.
That's awesome. Ruth, same question.
Diego, that just awoke a core memory of mine, because I watched a lot of Nicktoons as a kid, and I had that same experience watching Doug, where and again, I was a child, and I'm seeing, like, you know, I think it was somebody's hair color or maybe a sweater or something like that changed color. And my first thought was, oh, did they run out of purple, or did they run out of that color and they had to change? And so that definitely awoke something in me. I remember watching Nicktoons and shows on Cartoon Network and wanting to be in the cartoon. I didn't, not like voice acting, but I wanted to interact with those characters. But it wasn't until I was a teenager that I started being really interested in how cartoons were made. And one of my friends' dad was a collector of things, and he had a cell from Yellow Submarine in his bathroom, like in the basement bathroom. And seeing that, and then also my friend and I would watch Yellow Submarine, and then seeing that on screen, it started kind of getting those wheels turning for me.
Awesome. Well, that's just a lesson learned for the animators out there. A mistake that you make in the animation might be the beginning of somebody's animation career, because they'll notice it and they'll wonder.
We got to make more mistakes.
Yeah, how it happened. I also like, I'm just visualizing that Yellow Submarine cell in like a dark basement bathroom and hoping it's still there. It's just like a fun.
I'm sure it is. I'll call my friend. He'll know.
Oh my goodness.
It's just yellow now.
Yes, no submarine. Ruth, let's stay with you, and Ruth, I mean, as somebody who is making cartoons at the very beginning of the process as a writer, how did you arrive at that vocation? What was your first job? And how did you, like, oh, what was your first job, and then what was your first script?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of went backwards through the process, because so my first job was at Frederator. They had an ebooks project where they were looking for interns. So I started off as an intern, and was put on social media, and was very quickly you know, like moved into like social media coordinator. Um, and then was promoted to full-time as a licensing coordinator and production assistant. And so I was working with toys on approvals. I was reading the comic books. That was a really cool job for me because I got to, you know, read all of the Bravest Warriors and be in Puppy Cat comics and look for inconsistencies. And so that was sort of my in. And that also was my first in the behind the scenes of the animation, because part of my job was receiving assets, for those of you who might not know, like character prop background designs from those productions, and then moving them into folders for use for the marketing team. And so that is when my one of my bosses sat me down and was like, this is how a cartoon is made. And it was really cool because she played a clip of Fairly Odd Parents. And like first it was just the animatic. And then she was able to show me a couple color passes, and she's like, it doesn't feel correct, right? That's because the music's not in. And so she showed me how animation is layered. And then I'm like, okay, I love this. So I worked at Frederator for a while. I'm trying to think what my first, like, what qualifies as my first script, because for Frederator, I did do some writing. We had a preschool channel called Fredbot, so I wrote scripts for that. We would do, like just nursery rhyme videos, little educational videos for YouTube. And we had a partnership with Nintendo, so I wrote scripts for what we called Super Coin Crew. But it wasn't until my next job at Silvergate, where I worked with you, Bryan, where I really couldn't stay away from the writing process. I was still kind of convinced, like, oh yes, I will be a producer. That will be my track. And I couldn't get enough of writing, and I would be like, you know, wanting to read every single script of the shows that we were working on. I would like dig through the database and just like read every script. I wanted to see like how scripts changed from draft to draft. And finally one of my bosses was like, would you like to go home and on your own time write something and see if you like it and can do it? And I did, and I wrote a spec outline of the show we were working on, Sunny Day, for Nick Jr. And another script, like as it so happened, another script wasn't working, that fell through, and mine got put in. And so that was my first script for TV.
That's awesome. And I think that that's like a really great sort of reminder that like your first thing isn't always this exact thing that you want to do. It's oftentimes it's tangential, but what it does is it kind of got you in the room with the people, with the ability to ask questions, with the ability to learn. And then in doing so, you were working on your writing skills, and sort of it's like luck is that sort of persistence meets opportunity. And I think that rings true kind of, and it's mirrored in many, in mine as well, many stories of people's kind of first work in the animation industry. Diego, can I throw it to you on what your first animation job was?
Yeah. No, and before I do that, I agree with you, Bryan, that it is persistence when opportunity meets persistence, but I'd go a little bit further and say when it's obsession meets opportunity.
It's true, yes.
There's definitely an amount of
persistence.
obsession in my journey.
Yeah, I need a little of that.
Yeah, you have to subtract logic from that. It like, it's persistence meets opportunity minus logic. Because
yeah, very true. No, my first internship, I interned at Titmouse, and it was cool. It was crazy. I was an assistant animator on Super Jail, which was drawn on ones, which means it's 24 frames, not 12 frames per second. So it was a lot of drawing, a lot of tracing of tattoos, tracking tattoos, redrawing. So it was quite a bit of work, but I was interning there, and I would stay till like 3, 4 in the morning, just going through the files of other shows and like opening these flash files and like really breaking down what the hell was going on in these files and how the layering system worked. And I would just like, I wouldn't steal, but I would just like get all of those things into my computer and just really break everything down. The layering systems on a really large PSD on a background, how the hell they did that, how they would trace, how would they use objects in Flash versus what was independently drawn, and just kind of the nuts and bolts of it. After everyone left, I would just kind of stick around and figure out what the standard was to get hired there. Because as I was interning, I wanted to work there afterwards. So I was obsessed with trying to land the job at Titmouse because I loved animation so much. And so I interned there, and eventually I got my first job animating on a really, really short-lived, I think it was a movie, but it was a major laser animated movie where I would just do cleanup. I would that it was funny because I went from Super Jail, which was drawn on ones, to Major Laser, which was drawn on fours. So it was what was it? 4 frames per second, something like that. So it was really choppy. But it was really cool.
One of my first internships was at Nickelodeon, and I was an unpaid intern, and I kind of like took that being an unpaid intern. At the time, like internships weren't as regulated, I think, as they were now, but I was an unpaid intern, and they didn't have great security on their files, so I really did kind of like, I was like, enhance, and I went in. I explored like Bibles for unproduced series. I kind of went on like an excavation mission, and that is like, that's the only way to learn, is to like go through like sift through the raw material and kind of try to understand how it comes together. And what's nice is nowadays a lot of that raw material has been uploaded. You can find it, like show Bibles, scripts, animation files. A lot of this stuff can be found online if you look for it. So
one of the best ones I found was the King of the Hill Bible, which is incredible.
That's amazing. Yeah,
if anyone gets a chance to look at that, I would recommend it.
The SpongeBob Bible came across my desk at some point, and that was like a real, like an amazing thing to look at. I think you probably still find that out there. Alexei, what was your first job in animation?
Yeah, I accidentally got a job at Disney.com, the website, popular brand Disney. And my job there was to create content, write articles for Disney newsletters and Disney.com, just stuff, just fodder for Disney.com every day. And they basically gave me license to pitch ideas of stories about Disney and wander around and attend any event at Disney and go anywhere within Disney and talk to anyone at Disney. And so I found myself like on the Disney beat from within Disney, and it was really cool. And I had always been an animation fan, as we talked about, and I kind of thought Disney was like, it's fine. And then I started to really think, wow, my childhood really was so Disney. Everyone's childhood is so Disney to a certain extent. And I had a real passion for digging deeper into all the craftsmanship at Disney and animation, but throughout the whole brand of Disney and all that stuff. And they have a whole department devoted to this kind of stuff called Synergy. And it's a really weird place, but it was fun for a while. And then a small animation company that does commercials, they thought they were going to kind of turn public facing and make stuff. Commercials is a really B2B type of world. It's making animation that no one really knows you make except other animation companies and the brands themselves. You don't really have fans, or at least you didn't at the time. And this company is called PsyOp, and they're a big, popular, influential company, but outside of the world of advertising and animation, you probably aren't going to encounter psyop. But they were like, hey, we're going to make movies and shows and sell them. And so, Alexei, maybe you can help us like talk about our company like we're the next Disney or something. You know, I don't know what they imagined was going to happen. And so I found myself working at this company, and my penchant for telling a story turned into helping design pitches to tell the story of what, you know, the film was going to be, what the spot was going to be. And then it became, okay, well, you're really good at talking about these commercials. Talk to the clients about the commercials and tell them what the commercials are going to be. And then it was, okay, now talk to the whole team and tell them what the commercial is going to be. And that's directing a commercial, basically. And they, you know, taught me everything that I needed to know about the animation process. But the thing about PsyOp is that they're very much a mixed media company. So sometimes it's 3D and sometimes it's 2D and sometimes it's stop motion and sometimes it's fully experimental. Sometimes it's live action. And so you become I became a creative director, which is less about the exact procedure of making the cartoon. It's less about directing the performance of the 2D animator and more about the overall look and feel of the film. And oftentimes in commercials, you pair up as a director. And so I found myself an animation director very quickly and strangely. And I caught a particular wave that I think is still cresting of people finding their way into leadership positions because they really care about the subject and the thing they're making. And media used to be about, hey, this thing's popular, let's just slap its name on something. I would point out like Mario Brothers, the movie from the 80s. It was the 80s or 90s, you know. You can look at that Mario Brothers and then you compare that to today's Mario Brothers, and something happened. You can clearly tell something happened. Someone decided, if we're going to call this Mario Brothers, shouldn't the Mario Brothers be in it? You know, shouldn't it look like Mario Brothers? Shouldn't we hear that sound like do 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 do? You know, like shouldn't that be in there? And that like rise of fans taking control over the actual production of things for other fans, it turned out was a professional fan and one able to really talk about why I was, and people seemed to like that, and it did well for me.
That's an amazing story. Just the idea of like your passion for animation and like I want to underline your ability to talk about
Sure.
creative choices or creative potential choices or different paths
Yeah.
in a collaborative medium is like the number one skill to hone, not just in animation, but in any industry. Your ability to give a note, receive a note, communicate a note in a way that's constructive and not, you know, and empowering. It's like if there's like one thing I learned in art school, it was the ability to talk about other people's work. And that you only get by talking to friends about their work, reading people's stuff, watching people's stuff. Yeah.
Soft skills that are really interesting. I have an English literature degree and a film studies degree. You know, my degrees are basically in talking about stuff I like. As much as you can get a degree in talking about movies. I got to college and they assigned me all this math because I wanted to do something with computers, and I was like, I don't want to do math. I just want to talk about books and movies. Can I major in talking about books and movies? And it turned out I could, and so I did. And so I have a deep background in film production and film studies. I've watched many, many, many movies and had many conversations about what works and what doesn't and why I connect with them and why I imagine other people connect with them. And that certainly became a big part of pitching. You know, pitching is a thing that is such a big part of working in a collaborative field like animation, whether it's pitching your take, your script, pitching your storyboards, pitching your vision for an entire show, convincing someone that you've got a hold on it and they should go away and let you finish. and not take it away from you because they have lost some sort of confidence, and so that you can really do your thing and prove out your view and your vision. That it's a hard thing to teach, but important.
Absolutely. I'll loop back, Diego, to you just to talk about advice for an aspiring animator, an aspiring cartoon creator. Kind of what we talked about, sort of the soft skills, being able to talk about your work, being able to pitch yourself, being protective of your process, but also in a way that gives people the confidence to leave you alone. But if you're really just starting, you just graduated SVA, and you're like, you want to be a show creator or an animator, where would one start?
Well, I think what a lot of people are doing, and to some degree of success, is just making their own stuff. Like, I have a lot of friends now that are just, they're out of work, and they just started making stuff. And what's cool about it is they get to either you do it on Kickstarter or other ways, but it's you get to kind of um, create this thing where you can employ other artists, and come up with something really cool, um, in a time that it's kind of at a standstill. Animation's at a standstill. So places aren't greenlighting a lot of new animation. So I think people have just started to make their own things on YouTube or on other what's it I forget the names of the other places, but Kickstarter on YouTube, and yeah, just start making stuff and connect with other people, maybe on different social networks, and if there is jobs, and if there are jobs, the what you make, the short films you make are your portfolio pieces to show it off, so show off what you can do. And making your own stuff now kind of forces you to wear many hats, and be the director and designer and creator and the writer, and so you're more well versed if and when you eventually get a job.
We just had an animation kind of session at the Astoria Film Festival where we screened a bunch of films. I mean, you guys know, you helped program and judged the films. I want to give you the feedback that Ruth and I were there on Friday night, and I think like half or maybe like a dozen of the filmmakers were there. And they did a panel afterward, and they were kind of talking about their process. And a lot of these were thesis films or films that they collaborated on in the course of going to school. And so you could kind of see how much blood, sweat, and tears went into those projects. But from an outsider's perspective, I see their vision. I see kind of what kind of stories they're interested in telling. It's an extraordinary object to pitch yourself and to pitch like what your style and what your vision is, like a short film that you put into festivals. So yeah, I was sort of reminded that the animation short, going all the way back to like, like Gertie the Dinosaur or whatever, it's a powerful gosh darn form. Do you feel like, Diego, a lot of pilots are being made? I've seen a handful, but like kind of on that sliding scale of like making a short to like just making a whole 20-minute or 11-minute pilot. Where do you feel like a lot of the attention is?
I feel like places are not making a lot of pilots. I feel like I don't know, whereas they used to make 10 a year, now they're making 2 if they're lucky. And so yeah, I just think it's a rough time right now. But when it's always been a rough time. If you read, when animation started, it's always been rough. It's never been good. It's always been a passion. People with passion want to make this stuff, and now it's easier. It's never been easier. Before you had to, have cameras and photograph your work and all sorts of ink and paint, but it's just never been more accessible, easier to collaborate, and easier to make stuff. But if you read some of that history, animation history, most of the time they were always afraid that animation would go away. The 9 Old Men would always fear that animation would go away. They're just like one movie away from it going away. And Ralph Bakshi always talked about animation not being cared about. So it's never been easier, but I don't think it'll ever go away. So.
And all it takes is like somebody to plant a seed and let that seed grow. I think a lot about the animation industry in Ireland, which is this huge, incredible, like multi-studio animation industry. But everybody, like all the old heads in Ireland, can all sort of trace their careers back to like Don Bluth went there and like just started. He like did some productions. I'm probably grossly simplifying the story, but it is to say that like all it takes is somebody to invest in animation and train and cultivate like a generation of animators, and then it'll proliferate. But Ruth, on the writing side, if somebody wants to write for animation or cartoons, what's that starter pack?
Totally. Yeah, so I mean, I think there's two important pieces of it for me. The first is write stuff. It's really scary to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard to final draft. But it's really important that you start on your own. And because people will ask, what do you write? People will ask, what's your voice? What's your perspective? What stories do you want to tell? And if you don't have an answer, then, that's not going to get you forward in your pursuits. So I would say maybe like start with the spec script, which is what I did. Definitely go to the basic building blocks of a script. When I first started writing, I was really tempted to just sit down and write a script. But there's a reason why you start with a premise and then an outline, and then go to your draft. Because you really have to have the bones of the story. You really have to have those crucial beats. Otherwise, things just don't work. And then you wonder, and then you get discouraged, and then you give up. So I would say like make time to do writing exercises, make time to really explore and figure out what you like to write. Because it's also very tempting to say, oh, well, I write everything. But that not only is that not actually what people want to hear, but it tends to not be true. Everyone has their own point of view. Everyone has stories they want to tell. And the more you can figure out for yourself, because it's not always apparent, but the more you can figure out for yourself what it is you love, and what like really gets your juices going, the better off you're going to be. The second piece is network, which is what no person in animation wants to do. We would all be so happy to just like, sit in our little holes and type or draw or whatever, our part of the process is. But it's really important for, to meet other people, to see what they're working on, to make friends. And because that's how, when the industry is, moving, that's how you get jobs, is you meet people and you get your face out there. And also to learn how animation works. It's a collaborative industry, but it can also be very siloed. It was a while before I worked in the same place as animators and saw them animate. And I think a lot of animators aren't always privy to what goes on in the writer's room or at writer summits. So I think it's really important to build that community and to really like have your people so that when you all progress later in your career, you can hire each other and ask each other to be on panels and bounce ideas back and forth. And animation is better when it is a shared process, in my opinion.
Thank you. And I saw Nina just put the link to the Animixer, which is that. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about what that is? And
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I wanted when was that? 2019. I decided I was going to go to LA and just like see what the scene was, see if there was a job for me there, make connections. And while I was there, what I was seeing was that there was a mixer like every night of the week. You could, if you wanted to watch cartoons with people or meet cartoon people or anything, there was a place to do it. And then I came back to New York a bit earlier than I expected due to the pandemic. And I wanted to build that sort of community here. So about once every 3 months, I put on what I call an Animixer, which is a chance for anyone either working or aspiring to work in the animation industry to get together and have a drink and chat. And they're very often at Cowgirl Bar in the West Village. And the best way to learn about them, about like when's the next upcoming mixer, is either to follow at New York Animixer on Instagram, or there's also a link on that Instagram to sign up for the mailing list. It's free. It'll always be free. I want to make them as accessible as possible. And I'm also always looking for suggestions about how to make them more accessible for people who want to break in.
awesome. Thank you. And thanks for putting that together and for sharing it. Alexei, you look at a lot of art. I see, is the print above you Craig Gleason? I can maybe
It
see.
sure is.
Sure is. And maybe your shirt as well. Am I
Oh
making-
yeah, I'm head to toe bad guys clubbed out.
I'm a big Gleason fan. But that is all to say that when you work in animation, you're looking at a ton of designers, you're looking at a ton of portfolios. For somebody who say wants to be a character designer or do production design, what are you looking for on their Instagram or in their portfolio?
Yeah. So, you know, I at Titmouse, I hire a lot of viz dev folks because what I do is I develop pitches, and that means trying out a few different character artists, a few different background artists, maybe some other artists just to do ancillary weird things to get an idea across so that I can take it out and pitch it. And where I came from commercials, I did the same exact thing. And in fact, commercials, they spend a lot of money on one-time art pieces that no one will ever see except for like 3 executives. However, they are paying jobs, and for people who don't know, how pitching works in all different ways, in commercials, the McDonald's Corporation hires an agency to think up an idea, and then they go out to 3 or 5 different animation studios, and all those studios say, if you hire us, it'll look like this. And generally people do this on spec and invest a lot of money in this to impress the good people at McDonald's. And so they show them, here's a frame of what it would look like if we did it, or if we did it, or if we did it. And all that art has to be generated by someone. And so interesting artists are pulled in on a job by job basis, sometimes to do just a design or two. And when I develop series, I do the same thing. I'll grab 3 character artists, I'll throw them a bio of a character and say, like, if you did this character, what would it look like? And if you did it, what would it look like? We have a little bake off, and then we have fun, and maybe something works and we follow it forward, and maybe we move in a different direction, and it's all in good fun. And it's paid, which is great. So what I generally look for, besides your basic level of competency, right? Like mechanical skill. Can you draw? Can you put a character together who's got, interesting and or accurate proportions? What I'm looking for is a feeling that comes across when I look at a thing, which is a kind of an abstract direction to give. But whenever I'm going to show a piece of art, I want somebody to look at it and react in a way. it's smile if it's supposed to make them smile, laugh if it's supposed to make them laugh, be scared if it's supposed to make them scared. I don't tend to do a lot of I don't do like turnarounds, like flat mechanical drawings for pitches, because that's a production process thing. In the early stages, it's all about just like, oh, I see this character and I know who they are and I feel what their personality is because of the way they stand and the way that they're dressed and a feeling that comes across. So always think about, as you compose your artwork, the feeling that you want the person to have when they look at it. And that has to be a level above them thinking you can draw. Like, because generally I'm looking at the work of folks who went to art school or are very passionate independent artists and are drawing all the time. And a lot of people can draw, but not everyone is really trying to make me smile with their character who is supposed to be the smiley protagonist of the show. And then I'm like, oh, this person's going to be fun to work with. Their exploration is going to take this character into a direction that gives them life and dimension. And I can direct them with references of like style, what I want it to look like. I can have a conversation about color and shading and line weight, and we can talk about all those things, but I want to know that this artist is engaging in the exercise of making a feeling occur. So that's like a really weird and abstract direction, but it's important when someone like me is digging through Instagram or ArtStation and we're just looking at a lot of stuff, because I'm going to stop on something that makes me smile, or, if it's spooky, something that's really playing with a spooky feeling and a vibe. And in that case, it's like, oh, I love the shadows in this. I love the way the character is posed in this. I love the weight in this character's body and the way that they're existing, creeping out of this shadow. Like, there's all of those things that come across when you're really trying to tell a story and get a feeling made. That's the type of stuff that jumps out at me. And I have hired people off of Instagram and ArtStation and Twitter back when it was easier to use a lot, because I have just been scrolling endlessly through stuff, thinking like, I really need something and I don't know what it is, but I'll know it when I see it. And then boom, oh, this is interesting. And usually it's that X factor of like, it makes me feel a way. Um, and yeah, I hope that's helpful.
That's super helpful. And that was what I was going to ask you, is what platforms, when you scout, and it's ArtStation, Instagram, and
Yeah, I mean, I have at SciUp I didn't have as much of it, but at Titmouse I have the luxury of a really great recruiting team and an emphasis on, I'm going to producer shows, I'm watching films, I'm going to film festivals, I'm hanging out at small screenings and clubs here in LA, like some of those mixers that we were talking about. I'm following up on social media with folks. But I used to, especially in commercials, when I'm thinking about like frames, like full illustrations, ArtStation was just such a wonderful platform for a moment. I assume it's still there, although I know it's always every platform's going through a thing at any given moment. So it's hard to keep track. But for viz dev and like style frames and the integration of characters and scenes, ArtStation was great.
that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to actually follow up really quickly on what Ruth was saying about writing, which is be writing, and if you want to get hired to by someone else to produce art, be producing art and putting it up on your own and showing that you're active and interested and engage with popular culture. Not to say like, oh, make a bunch of fan art, but I think we're all trying to make expected genres and styles that much more interesting. So when people are doing that on their own, that jumps out at me also. When someone's saying like, I see your Sunday night primetime style and I raise you a little bit of something special of my own, or I see your Cartoon Network aesthetic and I raise you a little bit of something that I'm interested in, then when I'm building, I might see those things and be like, ooh, this person is going to push us all a little bit further. So that's always a thing as well.
I was
Can I
going
drill
to say,
down?
I think that relates to kind of there's a question about you know, how important is professional experience versus indie experience when you're trying to get your first job, and in the chat. And I hear that a lot from the kids we work with, like how many years of experience and does that really matter? But it sounds like you're saying it's more about what you're seeing than all of that. Is that true?
Yeah, it is really more important. Now, if you post really good artwork and then someone hires you and they give you 3 days to produce a drawing and you can't produce it in 3 days because you don't have that level of professionalism, then, you know, that might set you back to think about how ready you are to engage professionally with things. And when you get those chances, commercials is a great place. I would recommend that people really, as you consume all of this commercial artwork, you consider that it's all made by real people like yourselves at production companies out there that make commercials. They move really fast and they try a lot of new people out in commercials. And that was always a real privilege. I would usually throw like a person I believed in because I had worked with them, and a person who I just want to see what would happen when I hired them for 1 week. And then oftentimes that person who I had hired for 1 week off of Instagram or ArtStation or somewhere, I would be like, wow, that person was cool. Their artwork surprised me. They sent it on time. They are professional and good at this. And now they enter my list of like easy calls, quick calls the next time and the next time and the next time. And there are people who I worked with many, many times who I started with when they were like just stepping out of school or had never been to school. I did a video game with a guy who was a lawyer, and he was really into anime, and he was just posting like ridiculously amazing anime fan art. And I was like, I wonder how he would work in a production setting. And he was interesting and a little weird, but he was fun to work with and he liked to draw, and that was awesome. And I used him over and over again until he was so busy that I couldn't hire him anymore, because every time I tried to book him, he was too busy. And he was doing fan art, just full on horny anime fan art. He was self-trained.
Thank you. Love that.
Yeah.
Well, let's take that as a pivot into maybe 10 minutes or so. I know we're getting towards the end of our hour, but Nino, have any other interesting questions cropped up in
Another
chat?
question was from rough pitch to final product, how much of an evolution occurs when developing or writing an episode or a series, and what sort of changes happen, and how do you still retain the essence of the piece?
I don't know, Diego, do you want to, having gone through that with series, do you want to comment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, it's when you first read a piece of writing and you look at what ends up on screen, a lot of the times that thing that ends up on screen was remade 4 or 5 times, was rethought 4 or 5 times, especially if it's a board-driven show, because you have essentially board artists who are directors themselves and writers themselves, and they kind of change the story. And so, yeah, it goes through a lot. And in feature, I know, you start with the script, and then you start finding moments, you start finding comedy, you start finding maybe a B story or a C story that you didn't predict that would happen, but it just kind of flourishes. And so I don't know of many movies or TV shows that have stuck to the script so much so that it looks exactly like what's on screen. And so I feel like everyone, it's such a collaborative process, and everyone has to be like really flexible to find the best version of the thing, of the scene, of the moment, of the design, of the story arc that's best for the final product. So yeah, in my experience, it doesn't, the beginning doesn't look like the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Even things like the audience, like, oh shit, this isn't a preschool show anymore. Or like, like, oh, actually, this is 3D now. Things like that will, like, there's a lot of curveballs in development. Um, and like, usually the biggest surprise is if something actually gets made. It's so
That's
many
a
things
miracle.
in development kind of live kind of these short and bright lives before not going into production. So, but even those short and bright lives, there are people who are learning and getting their first jobs, and like, there's the act of creating a pitch and developing can be its own really fulfilling creative process.
Very true. Yeah.
I've
There's
got a
another
couple. Yep,
question
go ahead,
about
Hilda.
like where do people look for animation writers? So, and is there a similar place to kind of where you look for the art? And people mention Blacklist. Are there any places that writers kind of post and look for work?
I would love to know. Um, no, like you're so rarely gonna see a job listing for animation writer.
Yeah.
This is where the networking comes in. I mean, like, yes, there are places for like, I'm sure, but for writers, every job that I've gotten has been either because like I knew someone and they knew me and knew that, like, either they knew me from my production and development days when they knew that I had, a work ethic and that I was passionate and that I had saved saved the day by knowing where a particular asset was, or it was because I sent the scare, like, this is another part of my advice, is send the scary email. Because I was reaching out to new people and saying, hey, I'd love to get coffee, or hey, I'd love to come, like, can we have a meeting? And I just want to, to meet you and hear about what you do. And then they either would remember me or they would say, oh, actually, we do have a spot for writers right now. People get writers from recommendations from other writers. I have gotten jobs because I've been recommended. I've gotten people jobs because I've recommended them. So this is why I think it's half of my job is just is talking to people and meeting new people, and it's a joy because I'm genuinely interested in what people are doing. But just due to the nature of the industry, it's partially who you know and partially what you can do and how you show up to do it.
That's it. That is the right answer. I will also add, there are some writing fellowships. Fred Rogers, Sesame Street, I believe Nickelodeon still has a writing fellowship. You can't count on those because there's like 2 or 3 spots in some of them for thousands of applicants, and you can be extremely talented and still not get them. Always go for them though, if you have unfortunately, I think some of them have fees, but
Not all of them.
not all of them.
Yeah, most of them that I remember being free to enter, and it can, and there is real value in entering them. I got to all the way through the application and interview and round robin and submit a pitch stage for it was the Universal Animation Writers Program. I got all the way there, and I landed the role of alternate, which is if someone drops out, it's yours. Unfortunately, I did not get that. However, one of the people who was doing the interviewing remembered me, and then when she had a job at Sesame Workshop, then hired me for a small development project. So there's value. You just make an impression, plant your seeds, and then like 2 years later, something will come of them.
Yep. And I'll underline too the send the scary email, send the LinkedIn message. It took me a really long time to realize you can just cold call people by sending a note to them and saying, hey, I'm really interested in what you do. do you have a half hour to chat? And the worst that they could do is say no or never respond. But what's more likely is people love to talk about themselves. You can talk to them for a half hour and you can ask them some questions and then kind of keep in contact, update them when you get a job. That's sort of that's the like the secret tech of networking, is that you can reach out to people that you don't know and have no mutual contacts, and they're not gonna physically attack you. It's they could ignore you, and then that's okay.
Right
anime.
size your approach expectations and who you're going out to.
Mhm.
I get so many LinkedIn messages. I get many, 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 many LinkedIn messages. My LinkedIn like approvals to have new LinkedIn friends is hundreds of them waiting for me to click on them. It's a little overwhelming. That said, what was interesting is when I was a commercial director at a pretty big commercial studio, I didn't get any messages like that.
Yeah.
And so there are there are there are places where that works better than others. Now that I am, head of new shows at like the biggest small animation studio, I have a bigger target on me and I get a lot of messages. But when I was making weird video games, which were still paying the bills and in just a fine way, and were a real fun creative outlet, people didn't know I existed,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
sneaking by. And I was hiring people all the time. So if had someone actually reached out to me in that moment, they would have had a pretty good chance of me being flattered that they reached out to me and me saying like, hey, I can give you a shot for this, a day on this thing. It's harder for me to do that now, but there are moments in people's professional lives where that's a lot easier for them.
So you got to find the Alexei analog at a PsyOps-like organization.
Yeah.
To do that, you just got to do a little more digging.
Honestly, if you see people who make short films you like, gosh, you know who probably doesn't get a lot of cold calls? Short film directors and commercial directors and video game creators. They're not getting that outreach to the volume that, the animation studio, big shot is or whatever. But like the video game people are probably going to outlive us all and make more money in the long run anyway, and have more creative freedom. And that industry is flourishing. So consider places where, to just like circle back to everyone's answer of how to get work, was like community. Like that is absolutely the answer. And consider that the creative community is actually really big and varied and includes all these other weird things like video games and commercials and other stuff.
And educational media, and yeah, it's there's a lot of animation that exists outside of cartoons. We're getting to the end of our time. I do want to give each of our panelists the opportunity to make a closing statement if you would choose to. You don't have to. But yeah, I mean, any parting words for the community?
Sure. Yeah, I know that the industry is in a really hinky place right now. But this is I said the same thing at the panel. This is what I'm branding the year of make it anyway. Find a way to work on your craft, to work on what your personal projects, and to put them out in whatever capacity exists, or work on your pitch so that when things get moving again, you have something locked and loaded and ready to go. And also make friends, not just with the people who you want to be, but the people who are on your level now, because those are going to be your buddies. And those are going to be your people throughout the course of your career. And just, love what you do, and do it the best you can.
Thank you, Ruth.
I guess, I mean, everything you said as well, Ruth. I just wanted to add one more thing, which is the make it anyway thing is right. Just make it anyway, because you never know if it'll actually end up on a streaming platform. Like, look at Has Been Hotel. She was making that stuff a while ago, and it was really, really good. She poured her heart and soul into it. And this industry is so unstable. We don't know what it's going to look like in the next 5 years, let alone 10 years. But if it's any indication, making your own things from the get-go seems like it's going to go in that direction more so. So yeah, just make stuff yourself.
Yeah, and not everything is for everyone. I think that when people look at those, like, top tier goals of have my own TV show, make a movie, direct a Disney movie or whatever the version of that is, that's less and less and less makeup of what actually is the culture. And so we really appreciate that you have an opportunity to contribute to the stuff you want to make for yourself, and find that community and be involved in it. And there's a lot of fun to be had chasing that, and you just might find out that actually what you like has a big audience, and and they'll appreciate that you're the person making it for them. That's gonna just keep you busy and through times that definitely go up and down.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexei. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Diego. This has been an amazing chat full of really actionable stuff. Thanks everybody for your questions and for coming out tonight. Follow the Astoria Film Festival. We just had our animation session. We're going to do it again next year. And we're going to do, get some short films in, and everybody have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Bryan, for being amazing always. Thank you, everybody, for being part of the panel. Thank you, everybody who attended. We'll get the video up onto our YouTube channel soon, and we'll have clips on social as well.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Bryan and Nina.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.